Hi everyone, welcome to Priesthood Dispatches After Dinner Chat, episode 6, with the very lovely Debra Edwards, coming to us live from England, down south, and it's the 29th of October, so we're leading up to Halloween, hence a little bit of fake cobweb hanging out there. And I've also got with me as an extra special guest this evening. This is Zelf Jr., the white pygmy Lamanite. Junior to the one that Joseph Smith found on the plains. And he's recently had his work done, hence his fantastic robes of the priesthood there. So Zelf, you will reside there.
Oh,
Fantastic. So welcome, Deborah. Whereabouts are you coming from in England?
I'm coming from a little village near Weston-super-Mare called Banwell.
Fantastic. And before we get into your story, so everyone can frame it, because that's not where you're originally from.
No, as you can tell
where
by my accent.
Where did you grow up?
I originally grew up in Little Hulton in Salford. Shout out to my Little Hulton friends. That's where I lived till I was 27, till I married and moved to North Staffordshire. And then we moved down here in 97.
Fantastic. Now, this evening's episode will be slightly different in the fact that usually we have a very condensed bio at the beginning. But in previous, I guess, getting to know you interviews with Deborah, you've got a fantastic story, as I put it in the description, from Catholic schoolgirl to Mormon missionary and beyond, and how you got there. So there will be a lot about Deborah this evening, and I feel like we'll really get to know her, the life and times of Deborah Edwards. So we'll begin in Salford, which is near Manchester, in the northwest of England, and some good football clubs there.
Yes.
Are you a fan?
Not particularly, no. I always keep an eye on what they're doing, but
Very
my
diplomatic.
heart is with Stoke City. I tend to see what the Potters are doing more often.
Fantastic.
That was our families.
Well, if we go to the photograph that we've got on the thumbnail, and I think it was a photograph of you at your first communion.
Yes.
For many of us, we won't have experienced a communion or what that actually is. Can you tell us a little bit about that day?
Yes, it's still very vivid in my memory. It's a rite of passage for Catholic children around the age of 7, and you have to be 7 to take your first Holy Communion. And we had lessons to prepare us for it. We had an interview with the priest where I made up a middle name because I didn't have one. So my certificate actually has a middle name that I don't really have. But anyway, and it was a big thing. We all dressed up in white with veils, and the boys wore white shirts and red ties. And we went to church on Communion Day, and we paraded down the aisle, and you were given your first communion. And it's a big celebration, and the family came round. But that particular photograph, I was having a bit of a grump, apparently. My mother said that the devil got into me that day. I don't think I liked all the fuss, but I remember having that photograph and feeling a bit miserable,
Oh dear. Well,
and before that, you have to have your first confession the Saturday before, where you go to confession for the first time. And I hadn't really done anything majorly wrong, so I made up a couple of sins to do what to be forgiven of, so I could make my first Holy Communion.
And there's the photograph for anyone who was
there it is. Yes,
it's like it's something off of almost a horror movie kind of front page, isn't it?
Well, my son said it was like something else of Midsummer, which I watched recently. It was like, oh my god, yes.
They'll come and get you.
But still very vivid, and it was a vivid family, lovely memory as well.
Yeah. Well, but I think the point being, it's very much along the same lines of a Mormon upbringing. Around the same age, you have this big milestone, and then you go through that milestone, which is reliant upon your worthiness and your beliefs, and then you were a Catholic schoolgirl.
Yes, where I lived in Little Hulton was quite a strong Catholic community, really, mostly descendants from, because my family were Irish Catholic, and went to a lovely Catholic primary school, St Edmunds, in Little Hulton. And I think most of my Catholic teaching came from school, because I certainly don't recall doing any prayers at home or doing the rosary at home. We did have a couple of statues and a cross, but that was in my bedroom.
Okay.
So I think really wasn't very strong at home itself, but certainly my Catholic upbringing was through school.
And you were going to be a nun?
Well, yes. When I was around about 7 or 8, probably around about that time, we had some nuns visit the infant school, as they often did. And I would think, oh, I want to be a nun when I get older. And then the next week I changed it to be, I wanted to be a teacher.
Sister Act.
Yeah, I think every Catholic schoolgirl at one stage usually wants to be a nun, and it tends to last about 24 hours. I think because we had lots of nuns coming to teach us, or they were coming to play with us or to do activities right through to secondary school. And even in sixth form, I had a Catholic nuns teaching me. So I did have a great respect for that tradition. But yes, I did want to be, for very fleetingly, I may add.
Okay. Well, it certainly didn't work. It didn't stick, because you became a raving, horn-growing heathen that was a Mormon.
Yes.
Before we get into that story, I just want to say to everyone, pop culture brought Deborah into the church, and pop culture realized it had done a really bad thing and took her out of the church later in life. And we'll see where that comes in. But you are, I think I've only ever met maybe 3 of you. You're a bit like a unicorn.
Yeah.
At least for my church life. You're an Osmond convert.
I was an Osmond convert, yes. And when I joined the church, there were loads of us. Although I didn't join because of the Osmonds, because my interest in religion, when I was raised Catholic, I really enjoyed it. I used to play mass with my friends. I was really interested in all that side things of religion. And I loved the Osmonds, found out they were Mormons, never heard of Mormons before. Some very close family friends of ours were Mormons. They were less active, but he gave me my first Book of Mormon. I wrote off to the Osmond fan club just for a project I was doing at school. And Chris Osmond, who is the wife of the eldest Osmond, Verl Osmond, actually hand wrote me a letter and sent me a pamphlet. And then about a month later, the missionaries knocked on my door. So, yeah.
I think there were some GDPR issues there.
Yes, but this was like 1976.
Well, yeah. Give whatever information out you want.
Yeah.
Doug Vincent, Osmond mania was definitely a thing over here.
Biggie, yeah. I wasn't allowed to go to any concerts, though. And I did not like Puppy Love. I still do not like Puppy Love. No. But I wasn't allowed to go to any concerts. I didn't go to my first concert till 2003.
Wow.
But yeah, my bedroom was covered, and I still today have a love and a lot of respect for them, especially Donnie, as my friends will know.
When in the ward I was bishop in, one Sunday someone came, I was busy, they came up to the stand before sacrament and they said, oh, we've got a visitor. And I said, oh, well, okay, that's not new. And then they pointed to the back of the chapel, and Jimmy Osmond was sat at the back of the chapel.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Because he does the panto. He
was, yes. They've been very active over here. Of course, he's unwell at the moment because he had a stroke a couple of years ago. But they do come over. They're always over. There's always an Osmond performing somewhere, which is wonderful. So,
no, fantastic.
My little thing.
You know what? We've got Osmond fans coming out on the chat here. Mormon Freedom.
Really?
Osmond fan.
I've not got my glasses on, so I can't see the chats till later.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. I'll shout out to any Osmond converts, and yeah.
Yeah. No, awesome. Osmond convert. The only one in your family that converted. So
yes, my mother and father were supportive of me joining the church. They never stopped it. I think they did think it was just a fad. and a phase I was going through. My mother came to my baptism. They never stopped it. And actually, the fad lasted 35 years. But my mother, when I was on my mission, well, we had home teachers, visiting teachers, so it was, as I felt, it was a very amicable arrangement. But sadly, they've both passed away now. But I'd love to find out what they really thought. My dad was really interested in the historical side, and he told me all about Brigham Young and the pioneers and polygamy. Okay. He was really interested in all that. But they were very supportive,
Yeah. They didn't think you were going to be taken through that tunnel from Liverpool to Utah.
No.
Absolutely not, because that doesn't exist.
No.
So you were called, or you decided that you were going to serve a mission for the church as a sister missionary, which I think is always very brave, because from my, I guess, male perspective of being on a mission, there's always so many more elders than there are sisters. And for that reason, I think the sisters sometimes get some harsh treatment when it comes to the elders poking fun. And I saw some really crazy crap.
Yeah.
I wouldn't send my daughter, but you went, and I'm sure it was character building.
Yes, I served in the England Coventry mission, which is now part of the Birmingham mission, whichever that is part of now, I don't know. With Quinn McKay was my mission president, who was an absolute saint.
Was it not a red flag when the church literally sent you to Coventry?
Well, the local newspaper, the Farnworth and Worsley Journal, came and took a photograph of me and wrote an article. And the headline said, "Debra sent to Coventry." That was the headline.
Now, for anyone outside of the UK or even inside the UK who doesn't understand the term "sent to Coventry," it basically means like do one.
Yes, nobody talks to you.
If you send someone to Coventry, you are sending them there because you do not like them and you want them to go away. So when they send, maybe that's why they changed the name of the mission to Birmingham.
Possibly. I think it was a very small mission. I think it was a boundaries exercise as well. We sort of became, the second half of my mission was still called England Coventry, but we became part of what had then been called the England Birmingham. Okay. And now it's all something else now. Yeah. But there was, my parents were supporting that, and I'm an only child. And, my parents took me to the train station and said goodbye and all that. And then my dad told me when I came home that my mother broke down in tears at the station. He had to take her to a cafe to calm her down because she thought she was never going to see me again. It was the time of the Moonies.
Yeah.
And that broke my heart till to this day, that she made that huge sacrifice as a non-member,
Yeah.
And I think they were glad that I wasn't going abroad. I think that was but then I was only an hour and a half away from home, which caused some issues later on. My uncle used to come and drop off parcels for me. He was a lorry driver, and my uncle used to come and leave parcels on the doorstep and things, because I served in Northampton, Nuneaton, Coventry briefly, Birkenhead and Crewe.
Okay. So, yeah, because you moved across in the end.
Yes, that's right. Birkenhead and Crewe are part of the Birmingham, so we got sort of moved around a bit there.
Yeah.
I always say it was the best of times and the worst of times.
But we have a story from your mission which is particularly noteworthy. And now this is what literally we were speaking about this at 8:01. I don't know much about it, but this is one that I think could be up there with, like, short of church videos where a pioneer woman resurrects an oxen or something like that with the handkerchief of her husband who's on a mission in Britain. I've not heard any stories of sisters invoking the priesthood to cast out demons So if you can tell us the story, Debra.
Right. Well, I was serving in my favourite, which wasn't area, Birkenhead, which is a very interesting area to serve in.
Interesting.
And we were tracting, knocking on doors, you know, very boring. And this elderly lady let us in, which wasn't really that old looking back, but to me, she looked really old. She probably was about 16. And she said that she had these 3 demons that kept coming to her bedroom every evening. And could we do something about it? And she was, you know, wasn't a member. So to make my mission life a bit more exciting, I decided, well, I'm going to try and exorcise these demons. So me and my companion, who was like, I can't remember which one it was. It might have been Sister Classy. Can't remember now. But anyway, we went upstairs and I went into this bedroom. Had no feelings of weirdness or anything like that, you know. And I raised my hand to the square and I called upon my mission president, which was then Daryl Smith. I called upon the priesthood of the mission president, Daryl Smith, to cast out these demons that were in the room and that she would feel safe and they would not bother her again.
Wow.
And then we said goodbye. Nothing happened. Nothing dramatic happened. You know, I just did it. Just livened up the day. She didn't want to see us again. You know, no more discussions after that. You know, but I did tell my zone leader the next day, and he thought it was hilarious.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So there you go. I don't know. She never let us back in again, so we'll see.
No, I had a sister call me when I was district leader, and she'd got a greenie, a sister from Australia, and I think this sister had started giving a priesthood blessing, like healing the sick, to an investigator, and yeah, they kind of said, "Well, what do we do?" And I'm like, "Did she do it?" Yeah. Well, it's done, isn't it? you know, if they get better. And we know at this end of things that a sister's blessing is exactly the same as a brother's blessing, and it might even be better because you guys are so much more caring.
Well, it was. I mean, we had some good elders. You know, I made some lovely friends on my mission. I really did. Most of whom have left the church now as well. But I'm still in touch today. And you know, we only counted one kind of misogyny episode with one very young Utah boy, but mainly actually the prejudice came from some of the British members. Really, you know, I was told because I was a convert that I wasn't a proper missionary. You know, converts to the church weren't proper missionaries. She preferred the ones that were being born into the church.
I always thought they were the best.
And I was also told my companion, now one of my favourite companions, we were in a ward in Crewe, which is a lovely ward. We loved being in the Crewe. And our first Sunday, the ward mission leader commented and like, "Oh, we'll get loads of mission investigators now because we've got 2 dolly birds in the ward." I was like, okay.
Wow. Here's a shout from Doug Vincent. Now, I've not heard this one before. In the early church, sisters who had been to the temple were considered to have the priesthood. That might be one for fact checking later, Doug. But I can see hints of that when you do look back at some of the stories.
Yes,
and they do say that in the temple, that sisters exercised the priesthood during the ordinances.
Yes.
But they'll say anything these days, I guess.
I think I've heard that before, and that might have been what prompted me. I have a feeling that I may have been reading something about that I could do that, and then the opportunity. I didn't believe it was going to really happen. I was only doing it to keep her happy and sweet and calm her down. I wasn't really thinking, "Oh, this is going to make," because I didn't even believe there were any demons there. I just thought she's probably, you know, suffering from mental illness or something, you know. So.
Wow. Well, you don't want to take the demons home with you.
No.
That's all I'm saying. You know, it's there's many a story I had one where I genuinely thought we were being attacked by demons. And we fled the flat in the middle of the night, and it's. I look back now and I'm like, was it?
Anxiety.
Yeah. Basically. So you served your mission, and then went home, obviously.
Yes.
And what happened in life upon your return?
Well, before my mission, I'd been to university and I trained to be a teacher, and I have a degree in theology and education. So I did that, went on my mission, and then when I came home, I started teaching in Salford, teaching English and religious education, and generally trying to get back on track really with life, you know. And all my friends had gone on missions as well, or had left out the area. So I came back to, my friends weren't around, so making new friends. Just working really. My mother was very poorly, so I was a young carer for most of my life, and my mother's health had actually deteriorated while I was on my mission.
Okay.
So a lot of that was caring for her as well. And I mean, she was okay, but she had good days and awful days, you know. But her health definitely deteriorated while I was on my mission. And when I came home, there was a definite difference in her. But while I'd been on my mission, she'd had, you know, though she wasn't a member, the visiting teachers being round, the home teachers went round, you know, Maureen and Veronica and their husbands, Joe and Harry. And I know they won't mind me mentioning, they were the best, you know, and other members. Because when I joined the church, I was in Eccles Ward, which is now Swinton. And I'm still very close friends with lots of people there. And so I continued serving. You know, I enjoyed teaching. I was on the state primary for a while, loved teaching and being involved in things, you know. But it was also a very lonely time as well, because I think I went through a period of depression shortly after my mission. I remember thinking that I was around about that time. I had a lot to contend with, really. My mother was ill. I was in a very stressful job. My expectations, especially after a couple of years, I wasn't married. I didn't have a boyfriend. There was a lot of pressure then, and that was quite a lonely time, looking back.
Yeah, you didn't get married till the age of 27.
That's right. April. I always forget, you know.
It's 19.
April 87. When did I get? Well, April 88. I was 27. That's right. I met Martin at my very first single adult weekend at a friend's house. I met him there, and instantly it was like, wow. We were in the kitchen all night talking, and then we got engaged 3 months later, and then we married about a year later, and we married in the London Temple. And he'd been a convert as well. He'd been a convert of about 15 months when I met him, and he'd just been endowed. He was older. I think he was 30 when he joined the church. So he joined the church quite old. Martin sadly passed away a few years ago, but he was a very peaceful man, quite shy, had a dark sense of humor at times, loved his rock music in his 10 years after and all that, and loved his football. Very quiet man, very, very peaceable man. Served very faithful, served very diligently, you know.
Oh, fantastic.
So I married somebody who I never thought I'd marry. Wasn't a returned missionary. Only been in the church about 15 months, you know. Not what was exactly my ensign story, but it all worked out wonderfully. And we both had established careers as well when we married, which I think made a difference, you know.
I know you were saying before that being a career mum in the church at that time was quite rare, and some of the other sisters kind of didn't know how to deal with that.
Occasionally, and it might have just been me, but occasionally it was, I think from the older ones, it wasn't the done thing. And I never worked full time until my youngest went to secondary. But I was very keen, and I would encourage the young adults to consider, you know, continuing their education. you know, to get careers. As I've been brought up, that's how I've been brought up. So it was no, you know, it was just a continuation of the values that I've been taught already. But I think most were supportive, but sometimes if I couldn't go to a certain meeting because I was just knackered, you know, or something, then, you know, but it depends where I was. In the later wards, before we left the church, it was more difficult then, even though it was many more years later. But I think some of the youth, I hope, looked up to that. You know, I think I did. We used to look after some of our students when we were in Newcastle under Lyme ward. We used to look after some of the students there. They'd come round for tea and things like that. And I wanted to show our children that you can do this, you know. But I still feel at that time that being at home with the children was the best times as well. I really enjoyed that time, and work was there when I needed it, or we needed it financially, and as the children got older, I could develop it in other ways. But my family always came first. But I never found that it a conflict, because Martin was very supportive, you know, so it's never a conflict at all, you know.
Yeah. And
it can be done.
Yeah, and I think all too often you see families where the priesthood leader's out 4 or 5 nights a week, and then
yes,
the sister's got either Relief Society, Young Women's, or primary things to arrange on a Saturday, and then Sundays hectic.
Yes.
And then before you know it, the week's gone, and you just do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, we had that for a number of years. We were very busy with things. You know, Martin often served on the bishopric, or he was either stake or ward clerk. And we made a commitment very early on in our marriage that one of us would always be at home with the children, you know, unless it was like going out for a date night or something, you know.
Yeah.
And it was okay to say no, we can't go to that meeting, or which didn't always go down very well sometimes, but
no,
our commitment was to our children, because we had, you know, my mother had died, my father was elderly, Martin's parents had died before we met, so we had no other family around us to support us as much as they could, because Martin's sister, who's like my sister from another mother, she had her own family too, but our priority was our family in our home. The church in many ways did become second as far as the business of the church, you know, because I'd seen too many children because I joined the church when I was 15, so I'd seen too many children say that their dad, you know, I remember a very good friend of ours was released as bishop, and he was saying his little boy said that, can you read me a bedtime story now, and things like that. And we'd seen, you know, we'd heard stories of things where, you know, they'd never saw their dads. And I think that's how it was in the church, particularly in the 70s, the 60s, 70s and 80s. It was a very, very busy time. You could have up to 3-5 callings, you know.
Yeah.
So we tried to get that perspective as much as we could.
Yeah.
And we also felt it was important to be involved in the community as well. So I was very involved in the National Childbirth Trust, and my husband was very involved on the governors of the schools, because you were told to do that. So it was a busy time, but I hope we tried to get the balance right. I hope. You know?
I think these days it's very much insular in the church.
Yes.
And I think we're kind of like, everyone's just batting down the hatches because the world has moved past us.
Yes.
And it's the whole, we're not in the world. Oh, what is it? We're not of the world, but we're in the world.
Yes. And I remember once saying in Sunday school that, and I don't know, that the world isn't that such a scary place. And I was like, this look of horror and shock from the teacher. But obviously there's drugs and things like that, but there are some wonderful things outside of the church. There are wonderful people.
Yeah.
You know, and you always have this thing, well, they're not a member of the church, but they're so nice. And like, well, yeah, you know.
Yeah. And
we had more non-member friends than member friends, really, looking back.
Yeah, you see, that's like, I think about the people I used to work with who were either LGBTQ or, you know, in the UK, I don't think I ever worked with another Mormon. So all of your friends outside of church or just in the normal walk of life were non-members.
Yes.
And you constantly be, well, I love the sinner but not the sin, and things like that, and you're like, well, it's a bit rude that in the end, isn't it? I'm being a bit of it's a backhanded comment.
But I did notice the last few years of being in the church, or perhaps the last 20 years really, that I did feel more when I was with my non-member friends, particularly in the National Childbirth Trust. We had lots of women meetings and things like that, and other things that we got involved with at school. When I was with, I felt more myself. I felt that could be me. I noticed I was a lot more relaxed, because I wasn't doing it for praise or glory. I was doing it because I was interested. I wanted to give something back, you know. But I did notice within myself, I thought, I'm different, you know, I'm more relaxed and more me.
Isn't it strange that people can do nice things without the threat of hell or the promise of heaven?
Yes, you do it because you want to do it. You want to give something back.
Because you care. Okay, so we've done a real whistle-stop tour of Catholic schoolgirl through demon-killing sister missionary, all the way to mother, career woman, and now I'm going to bring us to a point, and I'm going to labour the point. It might not be so much a point for you, but you did bring this up in our previous chat, and that was the South Park.
Oh yes.
we did say that Osmond's brought you in, and now South Park has a bit of a hand in taking you out. And we've got here the famous I guess screenshot from that South Park episode that I remember at the time when this came out. Obviously I was TBM at the time, and I was like, no, that's not real. South Park, I know what they're talking about.
My first reaction.
But you looked further.
Yes, I remember, because we weren't that self-righteous, the fact that we did watch South Park, although I did feel uncomfortable at the times. We did watch it, and this was the first time I'd seen it. And you know, the head in the hat and the dum 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 dum, you know. And I remember looking at Martin saying, "Oh, that's not right. That can't be right," you know. And he just smiled and didn't say anything. And then it came back on TV a year later, as it does. And I turned to Martin and I said, I suppose when you think about it, it's a bit weird what we believe in, isn't it? And he said, totally, in a really booming, because when he spoke, he could have a really booming voice, and he said, totally. And I was like, oh, that was a bit strong, you know?
Yeah.
And then I was already beginning to have some doubts. I mean, lots of issues over the church over the years were on my shelf that I should have spoken out about a lot more, but I didn't know how to. But that was on my shelf.
Yeah.
And then that led me to just not being too scared to think in my head, well, what if the church isn't true?
Yeah. And
that's a scary question to ask yourself.
Yeah. But it's no wonder we had that reaction to what is an outside source that you feel a bit bad for watching it in the first place.
Yeah.
All the and the farting. But then the church, for however many years, has stuffed this image down our throats. As a missionary, I taught it, these images of Joseph with the plates, etc.
Oh yes.
And then I saw the other day there was a talk, kind of a question and answer, an old one with Elder Ballard and Elder Oakes, President Oakes, whatever we call them. And they were talking about church history, and they pulled out from 1970 something a BYU professor wrote, and it was in one of the church magazines, and it was about like multiple versions of the first vision or something like that. And that one data point they pulled out as being, you see, we're not lying, we're not hiding anything from you, because look, how long ago was that? 1970. We were telling you in 1970, and you're like, yeah, but then you told us 1,000 times after that a different thing. And Doug, you're right. Sorry, Doug's just saying that unfortunately the church still uses these pictures,
Yes.
even though they're totally inaccurate, and
Yes.
they use the excuse that, well, that's the way the artist drew it.
Yes.
Like, well, you approved it.
Yes.
But there's another image that someone put on Facebook today that ground my goat.
Yes.
As such, not that one.
Oh.
We'll go to that one. This is one that the church uses now. And you can see Joseph, he's got his hand on the plates in a bag, which is still inaccurate because we know that they weren't. And then he's got his white hat, and he's peering over the rim of the hat. And we know that's inaccurate from the accounts that have been given. And even when the church speaks about it, he's got his face fully in it to exclude all the light, so that you can see his chocolate rock. So yeah, it's strange when such, I guess, random occurrences actually tell us the truth.
I think when it came out, because when it was released a few years ago, they showed a photograph of the seer stone.
Yes, in the Joseph Smith papers.
And then they came out about, and of course, this is all church historical documents, because when I was researching, I wanted to be very careful what I looked at, and I mean, I'd already left the church when I found out about this anyway. I knew about Joseph Smith's polygamy. I remember being taught that in seminary, but I didn't know that about polyandry. I didn't know that some of the wives were only 14. I didn't know any of that until years later, reading Lindsay Hansen Park's Year of Polygamy on the Feminist Mormon Housewives blog. And I considered myself, I didn't consider myself to be a lazy learner, which is what President Nelson has called us. I taught seminary, I taught institutes, I've got a theology degree. I didn't consider myself to be lazy in my learning at all.
Well, if we go back, if we go to a recent quote from Marie Osmond, you only fall out of the church because you weren't far enough into the bed. Now, I would like to say to Marie, please come and live in a ward in the UK for 20 years, do 3 call-ins at a time, raise your children in it, and then tell me that I wasn't far enough in. It's utter shock. This image on the screen now of this I guess billboard in the States it's the seer stone, the chocolate seer stone. Like I can't guarantee the authenticity of this photo because I didn't take it. I'd be impressed if it was a church one, but I think the message it gives of being kind of young and hip and just saying to the kids, quoting Jesus, upon this rock I will build my church, and giving it's like they're giving it large and saying to the kids, we're loud and we're proud about it. Whereas to the rest of us, we're kind of like, well, you told us for years that they were anti-Mormon lies.
That is actually a photograph of the stone that came out with the Joseph papers. Which apparently was just some kind of magic stone.
I think it was seminary teacher. He was, I say, a big anti-Mormon. He left the church, and he was one of the first who was he was with the Tanners, and he died a few years ago. Oh, for the life of me, I can't remember now. He wrote a book, An Insider's View of Mormonism. I can't remember his name. If anyone in the comments can remember this brother's name, he was fantastic. He was the first one I watched a YouTube thing of him, and it was his aha moment, speaking about being in the church. And he said he went to the church kind of vaults when he worked for the church in Grant Palmer. Thank you, Mormon Civil War. And he handled this and other seer stones that the church used. And I'm just thinking, how much better would General Conference be if they rocked up with some seer stones, turned the lights off, and were just like, let's go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They just went for it and owned it.
I think if I'd known about that, I would never have joined the church. It would have, at that young age, would have been like, but then being raised Catholic, you're used to learning about visions and Mary, Virgin Mary coming and miracles. So perhaps it would, perhaps I wouldn't, perhaps it would have been like, well, that's what I was used to hearing about anyway.
Yeah. Me and my wife always used to say to the missionaries, if we weren't born into the church, we wouldn't be in the church. Like we'd never have actually believed it. And now that I think about it, I'm like, we said that for about 15 years.
Yeah.
Why did we
and I think also I never had a testimony of the Book of Mormon. I never had a witness of it. Even though I read it, I studied numerous times, I taught it in institutes, I was on my mission, I really struggled with it. I never had that burning in the bosom. I just always felt uncomfortable reading it. And I thought for 35 years it was my fault that I wasn't worthy. And then when I found out about the stone in the hat and the book of the Hebrews and all these other things, it all made sense, and it was a sheer relief.
Yeah.
Because I read, one of the things that happened was that in my questioning, my very good friend Judith in Texas, she rang me in tears about some things that she'd found out, and she'd been reading a series of books called The Mormon Delusion by Jim Whitfield, who is a British member, and I ordered them. And very easy to read, very well referenced, very well researched. And the first book I read, or the second, was about the Book of Mormon. And it was such a relief to know that it wasn't my fault. All those years I'd struggled and I'd really tried. I liked bits of the Book of Mormon. I would teach from it, but deep down, I didn't really believe it. It was really hard. I wasn't being true to myself. And that was really hard for me. You know,
I kind of think that relief, because I think we all get that eventually when we finally have that paradigm shift. But I think as well it comes with a bag full of anger.
Oh yes.
When you've still got a social group that are in church, and you've all of a sudden, in their eyes, you've been deceived and you've fallen. And you are the very bottom of the rung now. And then you have all these leaders saying these crazy things, and they're just lapping it up. And I compare it with my wife to the church is the class bully, okay? And the teacher is kind of your family, the people you love who are still TBMs. Now, the class bully does all these things, and then the teacher comes in and you're like, did you see him? Did you see him? And they're like, well, no, there's nothing wrong here. And the class bully kind of just smiles. And it's that sort of feeling of injustice of like, are you kidding me? You did not see that. You have not figured out that was wrong.
I was very angry when, and I always apologize for what I said when I was Mormon and when I was ex-Mormon as well. I was very angry. And of course, the church trained me to be a missionary. So I was keen to share with my friends. And when I told my husband what I'd found out, after I researched for weeks and weeks, and then we went to the temple. And I remember I thought, well, I'll fast and I'll pray at the temple. I need to have a really strong witness because I'm going to leave if not. You know, I was really, I really did all the right things. and I felt nothing at all. And we were there for the whole weekend, and I was worthy, trying to be worthy. And I remember thinking, well, either the church isn't true or God doesn't love me. And I'd felt for many, many years, I'd always felt unworthy, never good enough. And I was tired of feeling that way.
Yeah.
And then the following week, I shared with my husband what I'd found out. He then shared with me that he hadn't believed it for years anyway. He'd been going to keep me happy. And I'd been going to keep him happy to try and help him to progress in the priesthood. But for many years, he'd done what he could. He'd been faithful. He'd been worthy. But he didn't really believe it. He was, and first thing he did was cancel tithing. And then I'd never seen him study so much church history in the next few days. I said, being a good missionary, I said, you've got to find this out for yourself, And then after about a week later, we decided we had to go. We could no longer stay in it. But our 3 children had already left, had already stopped going to church anyway, which had caused some problems because partly we felt like we were bereft parents. We'd go to church on a Sunday. Our 3 children weren't with us. They were all in their teens and early adults then. We felt that we would lost our children forever because that's what we were told, But our children were wonderful and doing really well and succeeding in their lives. And they led the way, really. And my daughter was saying the other day that she left the church around 2005. I think she was 15, which is ironic, And there was no podcast. There was no John DeLynn. There was no Mormon stories, and she discovered exmormon.org. And she did her research on that. But there was no ex-Mormon groups or anything like that. So, I was reminded that perhaps we need to recognize our privilege as well. There's a lot more support out there, a lot more information out there, No,
absolutely. And I think something that Danelle says here, that your experience parallels hers very much, and it's heartening to feel less alone. I think there are so many of us that have come through, and we've had very much the same, almost cookie cutter experience.
Oh, yes.
Because people do get pigeonholed in certain places in the church, but then we come out the other end and we're so afraid of sharing that with others because it hurts so much.
I wasn't afraid. That was the problem. I'm Northern. I'm Irish descent. I'm redheaded. I was very outspoken. Privately, we told our friends privately, first of all, and we were called to repentance. So I was told that was like a dead duck to Satan. But most of my friends kept in touch with us, and most of our friends also said, well, that's why we've left as well. And if you're leaving, there must be something in it. So we said, well, here are the links. We tried to stick to church historical resources as much as possible. You've got to find this out for yourself. And then that led us to make connections with people who'd already left the church as well, and we didn't know, I think I'm less angry now. I'm calmed down. But sometimes they do something, it's like, I can't leave injustice.
We're going to get there in a minute as well. But before we do, in true This Is Your Life fashion, we have a voice from your past.
No.
Okay. We're going to see. We're going to see if this works. The technology might totally scupper us here. Let's see. Listen to this voice and see if you recognize anyone.
Hello, Deborah Edwards.
Gary.
Debra, your bishop wants to see you.
Right. Bless him.
We've got
I so desperately wanted to talk to Gary because he was my bishop at the time. I used to teach him institute many years ago. I so desperately wanted to talk with him, but he was so busy. And I also knew what he would say. I knew what the standard answers were. And then he came round to see us after we sent a letter saying that we're not going to come back to church. Well, we wanted to do it properly. And he came round to see us. And, he was so kind, and he was so concerned about us, And I really appreciate that. And sadly, my shortly after we left the church, my husband was diagnosed with cancer, and that became a lot more important. But then again, it was also a bit of a distraction as well, that we could just focus on the anger of the church, but really our anger was elsewhere, really.
Yeah.
And then Gary came to my home almost a year later, and we had a very different conversation. Bless him.
Well, yeah, let's see what
Gary.
let's see what Gary had to say. It's only a short one, all the way from California, as if by magic. Here we go.
Is your ex-bishop just leaving a message for you? Just wondering, how come you're such a heathen? I just don't know what to do other than to join you and be a heathen too. It sounds great. Just basically saying hi and thank you for opening my mind so that I can see. And I'll just leave that there. Thank you, everybody. Speak later. Bye.
Okay. So yeah, so Gary was your bishop, and you deconverted Gary as such whilst he was bishop.
It wasn't deliberate at all.
It never is.
You know, he asked and we shared with him what we'd found out.
Yeah.
And then he had his own experiences that led him to question that as well. And yeah.
And
I've been a better ex-Mormon missionary than I was a Mormon missionary.
Yeah. No.
For some reason, it's so much easier. I can't think why.
52 days extra holiday a year, 10% pay rise.
Oh, tell me about it. I love my Sundays.
Oh, absolutely. You know what? I don't even see them as. At first, I was like, Sundays, I must do something special with it because I have it now. And now I'm just like 2-day weekend. That's the way it should always be.
But I have no regrets because I loved the church and I loved the people who loved me. I had some lovely experiences as well, and I have no regrets because I was very keen that I didn't want to feel as though I'd wasted 35 years of my life. I didn't want to go. I actually went for counselling quite soon after because I didn't want to have that. I want to know how to protect myself, So I often say to people who are leaving the church that there are positives. Look on the positives as well. Hopefully for most it wasn't all bad, And I'm not angry against the Catholic. Well, I'm angry against the Catholic Church about some things. But that was a good experience as well. Fond memories of my childhood in the Catholic Church. Very fond memories. So I'm angry with their wealth and the paedophilia in the Catholic Church, as within, ironically, my own church as well, particularly the wealth, which I believe is that $100 billion is increased again, apparently. I could go on.
Yeah.
Well, but I think it's good not to look on the positives as well. Otherwise, it's not good for you.
Well, I think something that we discussed before was what would Jesus do with $100 billion? And wasn't there a parable about giving money to people and then burying it in the ground? And then he was like, no. Anyway.
Well, when that church accountant said that they were saving it for the second coming, he literally said that. And this is separate to their humanitarian fund. Every now and again when we're having political discussions with my kids, I always raise it. Do you know who's got the money to solve this? And yes, go on, tell us again. It's a big issue. The City Creek Mall and things like that.
Wow.
Which is no different to any other churches.
Well, here in the UK and Ireland, I want to stress Ireland
yes.
on this because I know that in all of the hubbub and Facebook posts and everything that's going on leading up to Halloween, Ireland's kind of getting left out to the side because these three old codgers, Holland, Ballard and Cook, have flown across the pond with their wives. I think the area president's with them as well. And they're doing this whistle-stop tour of what seems to just be mainland UK at the moment, going to all the places where they were missionaries and things. In fact, Ballard was in Nottingham, where someone I know is from. today, and he was saying all about how he stood there as a missionary and different things. And you're like, you are supposedly an apostle. Have you got nothing better to do? Can't you be at a hospital healing children or doing actual good in the world rather than being on a jolly? But I digress. This weekend, for the Halloween Spooktacular, tomorrow there is the youth session for youth and young single adults. The link is in the description if anyone wants to watch. And then on Sunday at 10 o'clock, these three apostles will be addressing the UK and Ireland. And how do you feel about that?
Meh.
Yeah, I know. Me too.
I've been to many of these over the years, and I remember 1976. I just joined the church, going with a lovely family to Bellevue, Manchester. There were thousands of people there. President Kimball was there. It was loads of general authorities, and then going to similar things at the NEC in Birmingham. And all being very fired up for it, but nothing really of substance.
Yeah.
And actually the numbers have got smaller and smaller. And even before COVID, they were doing lots of online conferences as well. And I always remember when President Hinckley came, I think it was his last conference over here. And we went to watch it, and I think it was online. Well, I think it was like streamed by satellite. We went somewhere to watch it. And there were so many people talking that eventually he got up and he actually said something like, well, I can have my 10 minutes now. Because he was given like 20 minutes to talk, if that, And again, it was all about how wonderful the British people are, and you British and your tea. And we came away feeling a bit deflated a bit.
Yeah.
The last one I went to was actually Elder Cook. He came over last time. I don't know when it was. It was August in that year. And my husband and I joined the state choir so we could have good seats to see this apostle. It was all bigged up in meetings, And it was just like, it was just on holiday. Yeah. And he didn't give anything of substance, And I was like, oh, okay. And I know that President Kimball said once, or somebody, that we shouldn't expect anything new. We're having to be told the same old thing for a reason, which is a bit okay. Well, that's nice,
Yeah, but now we've got Nelson who wants you to take your vitamins because, I think he said that you think the gospel's being restored, but it's not all here yet, or something like that. That there's still more to come.
We were told differently, weren't we? That
we were told differently.
Has now come forth, and that's what. Yes.
And it's the guy is an absolute. I can't say it.
Well,
for any Scottish listeners, he's a fud.
Yeah, I think I lost my faith with Monson. I remember didn't feel quite the same with Monson, and then gradually and then things like the are we Mormons, are we not Mormons, that whole campaign and stuff that was ridiculous. And then the November 15 policy, where they said that children of gay parents couldn't be baptized until they were 18, and they devoured their parents' relationships. And then they changed it 3 years later. That was really, that I'd already left the church by then. That just added to my already collapsed shelf. That just added to my cause to have to stand up and speak and share where necessary, And I don't know, I won't be listening to anything because I have no interest, but I'm curious as to what they will say. I wouldn't be surprised if a temple is announced in Scotland. They're bound to do something. I don't know what would surprise me.
They can't fill the Preston one.
I know but they have these small temples now, don't they? They have these temples all over the world. There is hardly any members that they're all saying they're going to build. That's still in building, but it wouldn't surprise me. They can announce they're going to do something.
So yes,
although they might just telling us how wonderful we all are, and well, everybody is.
Well, I think they will, and I can only imagine that the church has stocks in the UK and Ireland tourist board, because so far it has just been an advert for how quaint this country is. And
Mm.
I think there was a picture of a red phone box
Yes.
the other day because he made a phone call from it.
Wonder when it went inside, because they tend to be like toilets now, don't they?
Yeah, you don't want to go in there. But yeah, it's been, as Doug Vincent said here, it is going to be a little anticlimactic.
Yeah, and it usually is.
Yeah.
You know, are they actually meeting in people with people, or is it just going to be online? Are they actually meetings where it's going to be streamed from? Or?
I think they've missed a trick if they don't have a congregation.
I know they've met with some missionaries already, haven't they? I know that.
Because who's gonna have canned laughter for them crap jokes? You know what I mean? There has to be a captive audience, and when I say captive, I mean those people have to be there and they have to laugh, or coo and different things,
or stand up when they arrive in the room and not stand up before them at the end. I remember doing that, you know, in the 70s, how to do that.
Yeah, because I'd considered, if I'd known where it was, if we could have managed to egg one of them on the way in and they have to walk in without their jacket on, the disaster it would be, because we keep the priesthood in our jackets.
Oh yes, all right.
You told you without a jacket. Yeah.
No. Oh, just make me laugh that they would say, "Brethren, you have permission to remove your jackets." And it was a really hot day, and I'm like, seriously. But at the same time as well, I'm pleased that they're here, because, you know, there were many years where you felt quite distant from the American church, and I'm pleased that they're here. They're doing their roles. They're coming over, and I hope that some good comes from it, and it helps some people in their journeys.
Yeah.
But, you know, it is the UK rescue, because numbers are down. Statistically, what they reckon, about 15% are actually active. Tithing's down by 8%. You know, I've seen in the last 10 years 3 wars reduced to 1.
Yeah.
You know, in my own area. You know, and you know,
someone was saying on Facebook earlier with regards to Ireland, and that in Ireland there are only 5 wards and 8 branches.
Right.
And there are approximately, I think I said, about 5,000 members on the records, but around 1,000 active. That's just unreal for the size of Ireland.
Yes. Yeah. But it's a very staunch Catholic country, and Protestant country, Northern Ireland, you know, I mean, have their own challenges. I mean, when I joined the church, the numbers were massive, you know, and there was a time in the late 70s, early 80s, where, particularly in Manchester, we were getting like 10 baptisms a week, but we weren't seeing anybody coming to church. There was a real baptism fury going on, and there are people who are being baptized who we hadn't even seen, and they just weren't seen again.
Yeah.
And when I went on my mission, I was really scared. Is this how we do it? But my mission president was very curious as to what was going on in Manchester. I said, well, nobody's active. We're not seeing anybody, you know. And he said, well, we don't do that here. And it was a very slow, steady, caring pace on my mission, you know, which I preferred, you know.
Refreshing.
And yes, and I did challenge people to baptism on the door. Although, was it Elder Ballard saying that he didn't teach that? But I remember on my mission, that was what we were told to do.
They give it the same old line. I think they have like a format for getting caught out. They get caught out in something, and then they come out with this first line with everything, and we don't know where this practice began.
But I remember doing that on my mission, and we had like a challenge week or something like that. And how many challenges can you do that week? This is like 1984, I think.
Wow.
And we would, and you'd say it like, if you knew the church was true, would you get baptized? Oh yeah, and you could tick that off as a challenge. Nobody did. And my companion and I won Missionaries of the Week and got taken to a special dinner with the mission president. You know.
Oh, there's nothing like a carrot on a stick to.
But
but your missionary work now involves the internet as such. You were that incensed at everything that was going on. You became one of the co-founders of a very good private Facebook group called UKFormerLDS.
Yes, that's right. Do you know when you leave the church, there's 3 things you do. You have a moan, you set up a Facebook group, and you make a blog. I think I did the 3 things,
Yeah.
you know. And these days, it's like make a podcast is a new thing as well. And I started it, and then because I'd made some connections with Mark Johnson and Stephen Bloor and Jean Bodie and some others, just by chats really. And I think I'd sort of discovered we'd been watching John DeLynn as well and Mormon Stories, and we took part of the original survey. And then we set up a private group. We made it private because there were some members who were working for the church who wanted to join the group as well. And then, of course, some members whose parents were still active. But now it's majority of people who have left, well, 99% of people who left the church. Some who were still in but need a bit of support every now and again, you know. Yeah. And we have meetups, we have get-togethers, you know, and made some really good friends. And then, of course, we had Sunstone. We've had our 3rd Sunstone recently, where I met yourself, and that was just the best, you know.
It was really good.
And you do leave your tribe in a way when you leave the church. Because I mean, I lost my husband and my faith community, and the ones close by who I thought would support us most, many of them didn't. The ones who I thought were our closest friends, and certainly Martin's closest friends, I can count on my hand the ones who gave us any support when Martin was ill, you know. And I'm still very angry about that. Someone suggested it's because I was angry, but, you know, I wasn't at home all the time. You know, I was scared of little old me, you know.
Yeah.
But that was why we needed to make a new community. And we do have meetups and get-togethers, and I've made some lovely, lovely friends, you know. And it's a good group, you know. It's still private. There is UKFormerLDS meetups group,
yes,
which is our gateway group,
yes,
which is easier to find, you know.
Yeah. So if it's a private group, so you won't be able to put it in the search. No. It won't come up. But
it's not sacred.
Yeah, if you want to join, it's by invitation only. But if you Facebook message Priest of Dispatches, I'll quite happily invite you to it, but there are questions that have to be answered to be admitted to the group.
Yes, I think we don't not so much do that. You have to be a friend, a Facebook friend, to be invited into the group.
Okay. We can
can't remember if there are any questions. There might be. There are some rules about confidentiality and respect, and that some people are angry and we have to let that go. And of course, what stays in the group, what's said in the group stays in the group. We have had some problems in the past, so we've managed that very well, better than we used to do. And they can message me, and it's primarily for people who are British, you know, British or Irish.
Yes.
Have left the church or having questions, or people have a connection to perhaps they served a mission in England.
Yeah.
You know, they have a strong connection. We have some people who are studying over here who have joined the group as well. You know, we want to try and keep it. No offense to Americans, we want to try and keep it. It's our British view. It's our British group. You know,
and I think you need that because you just won't get it. Some of the things, some of the humour that's in there. If you don't understand British humour, you might be quite offended. Some of the things that get said, which are purely in jest, because one thing we can do very well in England is take the piss out of ourselves.
Yes,
we do it a lot. It's very much sarcasm based sort of environment. So
and also, you know, when we first started, lots of research links going up, because we're all finding out all these things, you know. So there's a lot of quite heavy based on research at the beginning, and then we still do that, but gradually it's also about news, and we will post what's happening in the church in the UK, because there are people who are still members and still want to know how they're going to cope with this, you know. We'll post about news about what's happening in the States, and Chris Mace does a wonderful fact checking about the Charity Commission reports every year, And the best thing is that now we have these podcasters. We have yourself, we have Doug, we have Peter, we have the 21st Century Saints. This is something we didn't have 11 years ago. It's wonderful. We've really come on as a group. It's amazing.
They let any Tom, Dick or Harry on here.
We do, yes. Although I have been known to kick some people out sometimes. That's in the early days. It was like, really? Okay, you're going.
You have to wield your power.
Yes.
You have more power as a Facebook moderator than President Nelson has. You know what I mean?
I think it's 3 or 4 of us that admin. Yes. Yeah. And sometimes we have to be wary because we're aware of also some issues with some members who may have left and caused a lot of issues. And then, of course, because the church is such a small place in Britain as well, we have to be careful sometimes because there may be ex-relationships as well. So we have to manage what's going on with that,
Yes.
I know it's a good group, and it's one of my favourite groups. And I think we get together as often as we can, which is great.
No, awesome. In the words of the famous hymn, our time is far spent. There is none remaining. But Deborah, thank you so much for sharing your story with us this evening, for your insights. I think every one of these, I guess, chats is very different, but I think we hit some amazing points from everyone's stories, and thank you so much for sharing yours. A couple of admin points for everyone out there. We have Thrive UK coming up on the 22nd of January 2022 in Bristol. Thrive is all about thriving after Mormonism. So it's a doctrine-free zone for a day where we can all get together and have a bit of a shindig in our common heathen state. This evening, Priesthood Dispatches has uploaded the latest blog entry, which is Mission Transposition, following a young sister missionary on the streets of Brooklyn, as she has her very own interactions with the mafia. But yes, thank you everyone for listening. Thanks for being here with us this evening, and we will see you around on Facebook and wherever you get your news about ex-Mormonism. But we'll see you next time. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.